Just tell us, just tell me, a book launch is still a viable prospect these days, or with the internet and everything, is it any useful to him, or is there something to be gained from it?
I mean, a book launch is just an opportunity to, share the book with friends and people I've worked with at the Writers' Studio, and, years after having spent years sitting in a dark room alone with a computer and the story running around my head, it's just great to actually share it with people who come out and are interested and support me, No Man's Land in the Writers' Studio.
From soon-to-be acclaimed author Roland Fishman, No Man's Land. I must say, as a friend and student of Roland's, I was relieved to find that the book is excellent. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and so then had no hesitation in taking on the job of emceeing this evening's events. So we're going to get started with a few readings from some of the Writers' Studio Pathway to Publishing course students who are going to read from their forthcoming novels. First up, we have Fred Taylor reading from his as yet untitled novel about a self-obsessed drug dealer who's forced into helping troubled street
To his immediate left sat Fleur, her peachy red lips and piercing green cat eyes, the centrepiece to a remarkable face. God, she was beautiful. She had 2,152 face-on friends, and the majority of them. If Jimmy would be alive, he said he wasn't hedging his bets. Thank you.
Next up we have Lucy.
In the corner. She opened the top drawer of his bureau and slipped her hand through his t-shirts and socks. She couldn't think what kind of memories someone like her father might give or say. Maybe a diary or an address book. He'd always given her money or art, and she went bad about everything that he couldn't tell me.
Jake Eames was slumped on a cracky vinyl bar stool in the Cross, tracing out the sails of Sydney's unbuilt opera house in beer foam on the mahogany. Jake glanced at the clock, just just gone 10. 2 minutes past closing, a century after the last convict arrived, putrid and seasick at this arse end of the universe, in exactly 240 days post-Whitlam.
This is Nico, who's a friend of Roland and the Writers' Studio. Nick was introduced to the Writers' Studio by his friend and colleague George Miller. He's continued to collaborate with George Miller over the last 12 years and has recently co-written Mad Max 4 Fury Road, which will be coming to cinemas near you soon. He's also involved with our Pathway to Screenwriting program. To discuss and also can I please introduce to you Roland Fishman's partner in life and crime, Kathleen Allen. And without any further ado, the man we're all here to see, author of the page-turning thriller No Man's Land, Roland Fishman.
Start by, for those who haven't yet read the book, the special operative Russell Carter has turned his back on everything he ever believed. Since then, he's been living the good life, surfing at Lennox Head and trying to forget his past. On Christmas Day, Thomas is kidnapped from a remote bush property near the Queensland border, and Carter is sucked straight back into the violent world he left behind. Now, an Indonesian terrorist cell is trying to kill him, and every other member. It's a great read. Roland, your background is in art sport, graduate, and sports journalism. How did you come to fiction?
Good question, Nick. I was at the University of California, Santa Cruz, and I actually did become captain coach of the rugby team over there. But amazing how synchronistic things happen. But while I was living there, I was living with a bunch of musicians, and every Sunday, a whole group of them would come around to the house we lived in the mountains there, and they'd play music. And it really stirred something in me, to be creative. And unfortunately, I couldn't sing, I couldn't dance, I couldn't play an instrument, I couldn't throw a pipe. But I actually started writing little character sketches, and that was sort of how, the beast of fiction was born in me. And I went on to become a journalist and published 3 non-fiction books. And it wasn't until I was actually in my mid-30s that I actually set up the Writers' Studio and dedicated myself to fiction. And it was only then that I actually really felt like I was doing what I was meant to do when I grew up.
What was challenging running classes for all those years and all the work that involved and writing novels?
Look, it's tough. It is a real challenge. And at the risk of telling a party joke, which I will, since this is sort of a Christmas party as well, there are 2 writers met at a party, or 2 guys met at a party, and one of them said, what are you doing? And the other guy looked at him and said, I'm writing a novel. And the other guy said, well, neither am I. But the point of the joke is, I hope it has a point, the point of the joke is, a lot of people dream of writing a novel, want to write a novel, but actually make it happen, is a completely other thing, as people, have worked in the past as know. And one of the things the 4-week Unlocking Creativity course we run shows is that everyone actually has the talent. And the second myth, I believe, is there's this myth that there are also a few chosen people who can sit down and write a novel and it comes out, as if they're a reporter. Where it really is a process, an act of discovery and a journey. And I've been very fortunate to have, Kathleen as my, partner in life and at the Writers' Studio. And she's really, helped me a lot with the writing of No Man's Land. And, you know, it hasn't always been easy.
Take a drink with me.
It's never again, to put it mildly. I often write something and I can sort of walk in all bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, hoping that, you know, I'd actually made this piece I've been working on work. And then Kathleen would give me one of her looks which are like, you mean you've been teaching writing classes for 20 years?
What was the experience like for you?
Well, what's it like working with Roland? Well, I mean, as you all know, Nick, Roland is brilliant at what he does. And, you know, and for like with No Man's Land, he had this incredible vision for what was on one level like this really entertaining, page-turning thriller with incredibly high stakes and a larger-than-life main character. But on another level, and what got me really excited about it was that it had the scope to incorporate like a really like complex love story, some history, some philosophy, to use different characters, and we're also able to explore various facets of Islam, you know, from the fanatic jihadist right through to the peaceful, highly evolved Sufi. Yeah, but I mean, having said all that, you know, it takes just so much craft and so much work and quite a lot of, you know, creative tension and creative conflict, you know, to convert that brilliance and vision into a story and a novel that works on so many levels. And I would read it and I would give him feedback and he'd do it again and we'd go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And you know, what are you doing? At times, Nick, I pushed Roland to the point of failure, and I would not let up on him until he did his absolute best. And obviously, when you have a very sensitive, creative writer, you know, it's going to cause a lot of blow-ups. And unfortunately, you know, we did actually have some of the biggest ding-dongs around the cafes of Sydney you have ever seen. And unfortunately in cafes, because Roland had been writing in his room for hours and hours and hours, and would be desperate to get out. And honestly, we were like the most dysfunctional couple that you have on the planet. Like,
not what he told me.
I know. And ultimately, the experience of this novel really changed us both as a couple. You know, because really once we learned to put our egos aside and really respect each other's process, you know, it brought us much closer together. And it's actually a very similar journey to what Carter and his, you know, loving Erin also goes on.
On page 2. Yes, okay.
Feedback's good.
This is Carter. The surf was his church, the one place where he found solace and the world made sense. So tell us about the genesis of Russell Carter.
Well, I mean, the hardest thing about this kind of story is, you know, it's very easy to write actually just off one damn thing after another. And, you know, when I was writing, you know, an early draft, that's really what it felt like. I was just writing one damn thing after another. And then, you know, something Vic and I have talked about, you know, I started thinking, well, what's my premise here? You know, what am I trying to say? And I came up with, you know, I wanted to write about a man who rediscovered his faith. And, you know, when I actually came up with that, you know, I was actually trying to think of what really intrigued me. It was a moment, it's that moment in the surf where, you know, I don't know if everyone's a surfer, but when you actually paddle into a wave and you know it's a bit too steep, it's a bit too big, and, you know, there's this split moment where you sort of either step up into the best part of yourself and connect with the universe and off you go. Otherwise, you know, the other thing that can happen is you choke, retreat into yourself, get smashed and wind up in no man's land. And that was the moment I wanted to explore. And so by actually having the jihadists who believed they were killing innocent people in the name of God, it really raised the stakes and it made their motivation believable. Because the thing about the opponent in the story, they all think they're the main character of the story. So it's really important that you actually make their motivation believable and real. And I think the other thing fiction does tell us, there's plenty of good in the worst of us and plenty of bad in the best of us.
Yeah, a lot of things. Carter, a very attractive character. So maybe it's a chick novel. I mean, he's very flawed, but in a very charming way. So, more Carter novels?
Well, I've actually started on the next one. I'm actually taking Carter to the Northern Territory. And one of the great things actually about doing a series, it just gives you the opportunity to dig deeper in the character and go on that journey with them. So every time Carter goes on one of his adventures, I get to go on it with him, and then hopefully readers will too further down the track.
Thanks, Ron. Thank you.
Just the last thing I wanted to say was just a few thank yous. My editor, Elizabeth Powell, did a fabulous job. Pushed me, to make things as clear as possible. And there's one scene where Carl and Aaron are dangling from the Sydney Harbour Bridge, and Elizabeth, I just can't see where they are exactly. And Kathleen and I would, sort of run off and take photos of the Harbour Bridge and try. But I really appreciated the effort, and it certainly made it, a much better novel thanks to your input.
Just at the desk behind you at the back of the room, and I tell you what, if you buy two, you can have two for 40. So get one for yourself and one for your friends. Christmas stocking. Those students at the Writers Studio who'd like to find their tutors, they're wearing a name badge. The most important thing is you all book. So thank you very much for coming, and please give a final round of applause to Roland Fishman.
So, yeah, it was a big night. It seemed to me it was a pretty big success, and was that another good thing about it?
No, it was actually, as well as for me and the book, it was actually for people who do the courses at the Writers' Studio. Many of them are actually, writing novels and screenplays and embarking on their creative journey. So it's, just a chance for them to actually get together, talk about writing, and, also some of them are doing it online. They've got a chance to meet their online tutors. And, I think one of the great things about the Writers' Studio is, when you write, it's very much you and the computer, where this is a chance to actually, share and, connect with people who are on a similar journey. And it's a really nice thing that, keeps us all inspired.